And we'll get people coming in here. All right. Hello, friends. Hello, musical buddies. How's it going today? Oh, nice to see a few friendly faces jumping in, some new ones as usual. Looking good. They're still streaming in, so we'll let people roll in for a minute. It's going to be a fun one today. All right. And I'll start prepping some other stuff while we're waiting for people to jump in. Good to see you. We got Larry Lobel. We got Ron Engel, Nancy Salmon. Good stuff. Got Todd Harris. Great. Always great to see you. Elday over there and Callie and Larry. It's got that West Coast contingent coming in. All right. Meet everyone. And I'll get us started in a minute. It's going to be a fun show today. Thank you guys all for showing up here. So let's see here. Get this rolling. More folks. I think we got, did we get Carl in here officially? Hey, Johan Krebs, how's it going? I saw Carl. Yeah, Carl Lieberman. There you are, bud. Good to see you. We need to catch up. Old Carl. All right, give me 1 minute. Get my notes together here. Okay, everyone. Let me just double check, see if there's anybody struggling right now. Hello out there on Facebook and YouTube. I'm going to highlight myself and our guest today, do a little bit of intro, and we'll get rolling. It should be a fun show today. So there's that. And add spotlight here for a good friend, Joe Jackson. All right. So welcome everyone to Piano Tech Radio Hour. We gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. If you'd like to keep up with us, attend every live session each week and support the future growth of this fine production, you can subscribe at bit.ly/join PTRH. And that's bit.ly/join PTRH. And that'll get you joined, and that'll get you free and easy access to these sessions every Saturday, as well as the recordings. Also, we have a couple of classes we've just done. We've got a French polish class by Doug Gregg that you guys should check out. David Clavins just did an awesome class talking about steel frame piano design and other awesome stuff about designing your own pianos. And then we also have the podcast you should check out. There's a subscribe to the podcast. Just go to pianotechradio.com or pianotechradio.com/subscribe and keep up with us. And so what I'll do is I'll get some of that information into the chat and the texting function over there in Facebook and YouTube. So if people are interested, they can check things out. And but you know, as I'm getting that prepared, I'll introduce our guest for the day. That is Joe Jackson. Joe has a wealth of experience and knowledge and cool ideas and vibrancy here in the piano industry. We've had him for one master class as well as a couple of radio hours. And you know, he's one of those guys that kind of probably started almost like any of us, just at Piano Tech, rolling around to people's houses and taking care of business. But at the same time, he's been growing and growing every year since he started. And he's got now a piano showroom. He does moving, soup to nuts, right, with pianos, and goes all the way to, you know, Canada and cold regions of remote islands where there's no piano tuners to like save people and stuff like that. He's all over the map, doing all kinds of cool stuff with pianos. And we wanted to have him back and check in on what he's up to. And today we decided a great focus for the session would be for him to talk a little bit more in detail about how he leverages the attention for pianos like within his community, how he makes it actually a part of what's going on. Because as we all know, pianos these days aren't necessarily the primary thing on people's minds. But it doesn't mean that it can't become a bigger part of what they think about. And of course, the more that they understand pianos and appreciate them, the more they'll get involved in acoustic piano. So Joe, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. It's great to have you here.
Hello, everybody. Good to be here. Thank you for having me. So yeah, in the vein of making pianos relevant in your area to help, grow and feed the garden of work that you need to have. That's something that we put a lot of focus into over the years because we don't have a giant company, but I do have, I think, around 23 people here now, and we service I don't know, 40 or 50 to 60 houses a week, and we deliver from the East Coast to the West Coast, from Minnesota to Florida, and so we have to consistently get our name out there and just really differentiate the difference between a keyboard and a piano. That's one of our biggest problems, is people that confuse a keyboard with a piano and think that if they have a keyboard, they're learning to play the piano. And so one of our main goals is to consistently show people what the difference between a real piano is and a keyboard. And one of the ways we do that is by doing something with the piano that people argue why they need a keyboard. We take pianos into weird locations to show that if we can put a piano on top of a mountain, then you can easily find a place in your house for a piano to live, so you don't have to have your 9-year-old learn on a keyboard. So we've done things from drag a piano up the mountaintop to put a piano on a boat, to put working right now, putting a piano and building it into a bike. We do boxcar shows where we take our lift gate and we bring it up above our truck, and we'll have a grand piano just sitting, 10 feet in the air. We do pianograms, where we have a van that we open up the side door and we've decorated the inside with lights and fake backdrop, and we'll do a piano show on someone's lawn. We put pianos all over the city, bars, restaurants, youth centers, with the agreement with all these places. They're going to pay living wages, it's not a situation where we give you a piano and you give the piano player a beer for them to play. They have to pay going rate, and they get a free piano. These are all attempts to get piano into our culture more, so our job is more relevant, so people see a piano tuner is something you actually need if you want a real piano in your life. And trying to break that barrier where so many people say when they come into the showroom, the biggest complaint is that they just don't know where to put a piano. And so that's our way to try to show them that there's always a solution when it comes to a piano.
Right.
You don't need a keyboard.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, just the sort of community awareness thing. I just want to make a couple comments because they might be useful for us to discuss. And of course, people want to put comments in the chat or questions. That's awesome too. But we just did this masterclass with David Clavins, and he's a very interesting case. He decided way back in the 80s that he wanted to design a whole new type of piano. And he, are you familiar much with David Clavins, Joe?
Yeah, I've seen his ladder to play the piano, and those are pretty cool. I really like to see one up close.
Yeah, and he also has one nowadays. By the way, you may not be aware and may be interested. he's got a more manageable size piano these days. He's got this Unicorda piano, and actually is making them kind of ultra light. He's created a piano design. Of course, there's less keys as part of it, and there's one string per note. But he does have pianos that are on the order of, I think it's really just like less than a couple £100, like maybe 150 pounds or something like that. So pretty cool stuff. But I think what I wanted to highlight about him, which came out as I was chatting with him, I think it was either at the end or maybe even after our session that we did the other day. He said people come to the town that he's in. I think he's in Latvia right now. It's this cute little town, a lot of culture, historical culture, things like people love to come and visit. And he's now a stop on the tour of the city. Right. So the tour guide says, hey, can we have people come by and step in your shop? And he's like, yes, and then he talks to them about, the workshop and his ideas and he takes a chance to actually bring his concepts of revolution. He has some issues with the current government, and he builds a bridge and, he just tells an interesting story, but it's part of now of what people come to do. He's like a highlight of the community. It also reminds me of I used to live in Peru for about a year and a half, in Arequipa, Peru, and the same thing, a chocolate maker, and they made their own chocolate. They made it from Peruvian, local resources and things like that. They had a little coffee shop. They opened up a pizza place. It was a community hub, and it was on the tour that people did of Arequipa, Peru. And of course, people came in and they got chocolate and so on and so forth. So I think you could do that with anything, right? In any community, no matter what your thing is, you could make it the thing that people want to check out there, right? And I feel like you're doing a great job of finding different ways to make it not only about pianos, but about the community and about fun and stuff like that, right? I mean, wouldn't you agree? Is that a great way to kind of look at it?
Yeah, so we are definitely we are a shop that technicians and pianists, when they come through the city, usually stop in our shop because we've got the weird pianos. We've got the Bluthners and the Grotrims and the turn of the age Specksteins and the Broadwoods and the butterfly pianos. So we're a stop for the weird stuff. But what we're working on right now, what we're really excited about is we're taking the whole idea of piano and how you fold it into daily life, and we're upping it. We just recently purchased this little building on this large lot. It used to be a gas station, and we're turning it into a piano wellness center. So everything that we do in this building is going to be built. The entire inside of the piano is being rebuilt out of used pianos. We've got a couple hundred pianos in our warehouse. And so the floors, the bars, the ceilings, the walls, it's all being constructed out of pianos that we've had to dismantle. Pianos that we just can't fix. They're just too old. They've been sitting in a garage or something like that. And so the floors are going to be like a decoupage of piano sides that we are sanding down to be level. So when you look down, you'll be able to see all the piano sides matched together into a heated floor. We've got a 9-foot Baldwin D that's going to be in the sanctuary, which is a lot. It used to be a garage, and now it's going to be this 9-foot grand with heated floors, and it's going to be acoustically set up for doing recordings. But we're also going to be doing piano meditation, piano yoga, piano massage therapy, piano, just all of these different levels of piano in your life.
And of course, piano massage therapy means people bring their pianos in and they get the piano massaged, right? Is that?
They get, exactly. We put moving a piano. That's it. We just put it on your back and we throw you in front of a flight of stairs and say, climb.
Nice.
So it's going to be pretty wild, and it's all piano based. So live piano is going to be every part of it. And then we're going to be mixing different instruments, our craziest pianos that we can rebuild. We're going to put up there, and we're going to do live stream shows once a month with the weirdest stuff we can find. And again, this is a way to get people, interacting and seeing the relevance of piano in our city, and the different ways that we can use piano. We're going to get as creative as we possibly can, and the hope is that it becomes a thing that people, when they go by the St. Louis area, they stop and check out the Piano Wellness Center, and
Yeah.
it's good for pianos and it's good for humans too.
So,
So
so generally I would love to dive into that a little bit deeper, but a question that's coming to mind for me that I'm sure comes to a lot of people's minds, because clearly, like, I would say there's probably at least 25% of piano technicians in general probably dream of even having their own piano workshop one day, maybe their own storefront, maybe going on to do some kind of fun community stuff or whatever, but it doesn't happen, right? And also there's, the piano, the sort of techs also that kind of dream of doing the highest level of work ever, but it doesn't happen either. There's, they can't get the education. Like, it feels like a big investment. I guess the question that I wanted to ask is, from the outside, and I think we've had a few talks that I think I'm right on this. You're not a bad business person. Like, you do a pretty okay job. At least you've grown your business to a certain size, which takes a lot of business savvy. How do you think about doing these things, which maybe sound a little bit like, they sound fun, to be honest. And I think it's easy to go like, maybe those fun things aren't good business. You know what I mean? Like, how do you approach doing things that kind of sound fun and imaginative and creative, but also like making sure you do them in a way that is profitable or geared towards like having the business grow and support things?
yeah, that's the dirty side of it. We try to hide. It's the there's no man behind the curtain kind of thing. Everything that we do secretly, we have to crunch numbers. I have to constantly crunch numbers. No matter how weird something gets, I have to crunch the numbers. I've got to engage a way that it is going to have either a passive or a direct effect in marketing. I don't like to talk about that one in the general public too much because it takes
Sure.
it takes the magic out of the act. But here in this forum, of course, I'm more than happy to dive into it. So when we do these different things, we have mechanisms that we build into it to gauge our interaction, and then we have, I just blanked out on the term. In marketing, you have two basically. You've got many different aspects of it, but there's two big forms. One is branding, and then the other one is call to action. And
Mm-hmm.
so we have a kind of a metric that we follow with branding and call to action with anything that we do. And then we have to really isolate what is our main focus on this individual thing. So if it's something like getting a piano out in front of people's homes to do performances, we're going to allot a certain amount of branding that we budget. How much of this is just getting our brand out there, which means that if it's branding, that means we have to get we got to get a hold of every radio show we can get in TV and paper. We got to get at least one of them to pick us up, because that's the end goal. We have to get in front of a paper, or we've got to get on a news channel. Now, if it's call to action, then what you don't really see is after we do the show, we've got these tickets that are like $15 off of a tuning, $15 off, or $20 off of a piano cleaning, $100 off of a piano purchase. So we've got a marketing scheme that we run silently behind it. So we're going to, and we have a goal. We've got to move 15 tickets or 25 tickets. It's got to equal at least, $3,500 worth of work. So when we do these things and put a piano in a weird spot, we have to marry it with job creation or solid evidence-based branding. Now, we don't talk about that when we do our stuff. From the outside, we just look like we've lost our mind. But in reality, everything's calculated. You have to be. I don't like that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't do it, you can't keep doing it. And I've got 23 mouths to feed, plus their families, plus 3 locations. So if I'm not careful, this would just be wasting money.
Right.
And there are plenty of times where it doesn't work out and it's a waste of money, but it's not for lack of trying. So whenever you're going to do something zany, you got to have some kind of metric behind it for what you're going to gain from it. Um,
Yeah, that's really super useful to hear about. And yes, of course, it doesn't make sense to make that the focus that the customer sees or something like that. But I think from the general perspective, I think the crazy ideas or the fun ideas come out there. Or even I think the more harder thing is when somebody from outside your system has a crazy idea and that that's not a good idea. Hey, you know what you should do? You should build a giant tower out of pianos in front of my house or whatever. Okay, like, yeah, that sounds fun, but I don't think that I have to think about some sort of budget behind that. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And that helps. And also just having metrics. Cause I think, I actually, I think I could do better to learn to be a better what you call an experimentalist. I studied science. I studied neuroscience. I have a PhD. I was in a lab where we did science. I taught statistics, and it's a basic fact of how, the scientific method purportedly should go is that you have your hypothesis about what's going to happen before you do the experiment, right? You have your predictions about what's going to happen before you do the experiment, right? You can't predict what's going to happen after you do the experiment. You might be biased. You say, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. And you also have to set your metrics, just like you said, before you do the experiment, right? I have to say, okay, yeah, I'm gonna have 10, 10 rats in this treatment and 10 in the control treatment, and I'm going to expect, that there's got to be 30% more before I'm going to conclude that this particular treatment worked, right? If it's 20%, I decide ahead of time that doesn't justify my standards, that my hypothesis that this particular treatment, this drug or whatever worked, right? And so, I'm sure you didn't study, the scientific method as deeply as that, or statistics per se, but just from a business perspective or just a general perspective of us doing those things, like you said, having those things that you think about beforehand, right, is almost essential, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have in our career, in our craft, we have to just juggle this myth out there where, we as piano technicians and tuners, just love our day every day, and that our jobs just come naturally to us. And then we're so fortunate that we get to sit and just listen to music all day, which isn't true. I mean, we all know there are plenty of days we just are tortured by instruments, and and there's plenty of days that we're not happy with the work that we put out. But we have to be able to value our time, and you've got to come up with, when we do something zany, we still are coming up with, an idea of what we have to bring in the end. It's the same thing as a technician. When you're going out in the field, you've got to put a value to your hourly time, and we have a metric for that as well. So basically I learned when I went out in the field, like, okay, I need to bring X amount per hour. And then I just took that idea and then changed it around for the publicity side. And just, I took the same basic idea or thought process and switched it to, instead of me, how much do I need to bring in per hour if I'm driving to someone's home and then working on their piano and then pulling out their key bed, yada, yada, yada. And then just said, okay, if I've got people in the office working on this and I'm going to yank a piano, da, 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 it's very similar. My brain got trained on doing this by having to plot out my days tuning to where at the end of the day, I wasn't making $25 an hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
but you can't tell anybody about that kind of stuff because they just think that you do piano tuning because you're a weirdo and you just love tuning pianos all day.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which some of us do.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. But we also have to live. We have to survive, buy food and all that stuff.
I have heard the same story, which I'll say in a minute, from many, many technicians, especially around doing some sort of rebuilding work or like actually a larger scale project with pianos, restringing, whatever stuff that I think one of the biggest pitfalls that techs can run into is taking on a job, especially a new skill, maybe something you can handle, but it's relatively new, you haven't done before, and you bid out the job for the client. And there's an initial excitement because you're like, this is incredible. I'm going to be the revenue on this is $5,000. So this is the biggest job I ever did. This is amazing. I'm moving up in the world. This is great. Right. And then you take on the job, you do it, and it takes 3 months, Maybe you didn't quite get it right too. There's a little bit of a mistake. So you had to go up and make up for that. Maybe even have to pay for something that you messed up. And then I've heard so many people say, and some people don't even do this, they got out a piece of paper and they wrote down the number of hours that they did, and they calculated the amount of money that came in. They said, well, I was making $2 an hour.
Yeah, that's really common. I mean, we track our jobs. We about, oh gosh, 10, 12 years ago, we started a not-for-profit. And in that not-for-profit, one of the things we had to do was we had to really track our time, because I had to know how much money I was losing on all these pianos I was donating. But that taught me how to really track time, and it made us create systems for tracking time. And that was an eye-opening experience, because I took that idea of tracking time for donated pianos and applied it to rebuilding work. And I realized really quick, things like hammer jobs, I was charging like $2,000. And I realized, holy moly, I should be charging $4,200, because when I added the labor and the parts, I was basically giving away all the parts every single time I did a hammer job, because I went off of this idea of what I thought it was taking. But when I actually sat down and wrote down each step and all of the different setups and the breakdown of the machines, I was just losing it really bad. Yeah, it was.
Well, one thing I was going to say too, which I think is worth mentioning, and I know we have a lot of independent techs in the group, so we'll see how much this is worth. But for folks that, so two things. One, even for myself, I'm conducting this conversation, I'm leading it, we're talking about these. It's difficult for me, even though I can talk through it and we can say what we should do, right? That stuff takes the mental effort, focus, skill. Just understanding of how to go about this stuff. And it's not easy to do. And I think one of the things that I've noticed, which I'm trying for myself in various projects, is that you don't have to do it if you're not good at it. You can get someone else to do it. So I've definitely heard of countless situations where someone does have the crazy fun ideas, they come up with them and they say, hey, we're going to do this. It's bold. It's amazing. It's extravagant, And then they've got the accountant, or whoever that person is, and they give the idea to the accountant, and the accountant goes, you can't do that. You're not going to make any money. But they do come back, they go back and forth and they say, okay, here's how you can do that. Right. So yeah. I think that's one of the things is like, if I'm uncomfortable or anybody's uncomfortable with this stuff and you have trouble learning it or getting it under your belt, it doesn't mean that you can't bring someone else onto your team for that stuff that's going to push back and help you think it through, right?
Yeah, you definitely need somebody to level you. And one of the things that I would encourage people to look at is like Google Analytics, right? Everybody knows Google is like the king daddy, like Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff is just second tier. Google's really is. That's it. That's the top dog. And what I always try to look at is like, well, if I was going to do a really aggressive Google Analytic campaign, maybe it'd be $2,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 in a month. What I try to walk back from is, all right, if I put in $5,000 with Google Analytics, what would I expect to get historically as far as new clients or rebuilding work? And I write those numbers down. Then I take that $5,000 and it suddenly starts a different conversation. Or maybe it's $500, whatever you want. You can do a lot with $500. Just lower it down to like, I'm going to scale this down from a 23-person operation to a 2-person operation. Let's say it's $500. All right. And you plan on getting maybe from maybe you'll get 8 clients in that month for $500. What are the other ways you can use that $500 to maybe get 10, or maybe get 15, or maybe you get 8, but you also get in front of more people, so your branding gets up higher, because you got to keep up with your competition with that kind of stuff as far as getting out in front of faces. So I always like to take the most popular way, the way that the advertising companies say, this is the way to do it. And then I like to take that that amount of money and look at different ways. So if the branding company says spend this much, I say, okay, now you gave me a metric. You believe that this is what I should spend. And then I'll look at it against 10 or 12 different other things that I find more creative. And then I quantify that by saying, okay, I'm going to engage these people and I'm going to have a tool to get them to hire me to do specific things, to see how I can use that budget in ways that I feel more excited about. And it could be putting on a show or sponsoring a show or dragging a piano onto a street corner or donating tunings to a local school, as long as you properly utilize the ad stuff they give you, make it a coupon, make it a call to action. But you got to spend the money on advertising no matter what. So just think of creative ways that make you excited about how you're going to spend that. Because the easy way is just to throw it in Google Analytics and let Google just suck up your money. And that's the way that everybody tells you. Any advertising person, the first thing they're going to say is Google Analytics across the board. You're doing that, and then everything else any money you have left over, you can try some other stuff, but really just put it more money into Google Analytics. But that's my personal experience, and I've had a lot of success with that. If you come into my city and you mention piano to almost anybody, my shop comes up right off the top in almost every conversation. You jump on Facebook in St. Louis, and our shop comes up over and over and over and over and over and over again. And we hardly spend anything on Google Analytics. I take the recommended money and I take most of it and put it into crazy zany stuff with vehicles to initiate business after you've seen our crazy weird thing. And it's really, I don't want to be doom and gloom, but we've all watched our industry shrink, and we have to be really active because our industry is shrinking. I don't know about you guys or where you're at, but when I started, there were 12 piano stores in my city. Now there's 3. And there were 38 guild members that were mostly all active. Now we've got 24, and we've got probably 9 or 10 that are really active. Mm-hmm. And so, we're swimming against the current right now. And so to set ourselves apart from the other people out there, to be an RPT or to be a guild member is great, but that's not really going to drive it in anymore. You really have to set yourself aside from the other people because they're all talented. They all love piano. And so you really got to have something that gives the people a reason to call you as opposed to the other person that is in the white pages that doesn't exist anymore next to your name.
So I have one more sort of comment to make around what we just talked about, sort of the businessy side of things. And then maybe we'll go back to kind of the fun of it a little bit. I'd love to hear a little bit about the sort of details that you're planning and the kind of the joy side of it that naturally it does come with this stuff. I've hired an operations manager to help with my business in New York. And now we actually have a technician here in the Chicago area where I live. But yeah, and then this was a case where I like numbers. I like doing calculations and stuff like that. But the business had been going on for so long. I was just a little bit tired of thinking through, like you're saying, like the Google ads, what's the value, optimizing them, even paying someone else to do it sounded like a headache because you got to like manage them and see if they're doing a good job. And he did the calculations for me, and he said, so what do you want your client acquisition cost to be? Like how much is it worth to pay to get a client, right? And you come up with that number, and that's different depending on everybody's business, what you feel's worth it. And so we agreed upon something that sounded reasonable. And then he just did some calculations around Google ads and how much you have to pay for a click and how many of those clicks would probably turn into piano tuning clients. And he came back and he said, this is probably not a good idea, and by doing those type of calculations, you could save yourself a lot. And then you can go apply that to something else, be it, gathering. And by the way, the other thing about what you're saying is if you do get referenced in a publication or, some sort of other resource, those are things that do help your, SEO, right? Your searchability online, because they do some story about you, they talk about you, and they link back to your website. And of course, that is something that brings attention to who you are, that people are talking about you, not necessarily that you're talking about yourself, right?
Yeah, and those are really. We've been in the New York Times, we've been in the Washington Post, we've been in the, and those times are when I get the biggest bang. When we were featured in a publication, it's addictive. It's like a drug. You get into a paper and then suddenly you get 20 calls. A lot of bankers usually, which is weird. I don't understand that. Anytime we got publicized in anything larger, two or three bankers would call. Just as there's something with bankers, and they're like sharks in the water for hearing about a successful business. But you can't rely on that as your daily. But that's a great way if you can aim to get yourself into something, even if it's a newspaper, a local news. Those local ones are great, like a regional little thing, like a newspaper in your little town area. Those are really wonderful for getting, you know, 10, 5, 15 new clients, just boom, all in one shot. And you can do, you really bringing attention to yourself. There's nothing wrong with bringing attention to yourself, what you do. We all get used to what we do, and it sounds humdrum and boring because we do it all the time. But when you explain what you do to other people, it's interesting because they don't. A lot of people just sit on computers all day. They don't dive inside of 100-year-old pieces of wood that have thousands of parts and in paper news clippings from 1905 and bubble gum from 1923 stuck to the bottom of the keyboard. And there's just, in your daily existence you run across things that are phenomenally interesting, but you just got to learn how to see it through a different lens instead of the normal tuner lens. And that we're really, that really is helpful with getting the average Joe Schmo Spaghettio to get excited about what you're doing. Because it
Right.
does, we become numb to how interesting a lot of the aspects of our work really is.
Yeah. Let me bring up, I'll do a screen share now. And I would think we were going to look a little bit at your Instagram and some of the stuff going on there. Should we skip over to that for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
All right, cool. All right, let's pop over to this. Should work. Okay, can we see that? And then by the way, so this is just your Instagram feed. And then if I switch tabs, can people see that? Or did it not change? Oh, now I can't hear you. Did you mute yourself, Joe? Or did that just, yeah, you're muted.
There you go. Sorry. I see the screen. I don't know
Cool.
about everyone else.
You see the picture of you and your buddy there.
Yeah, that's the president.
Tell us about this one.
That's a chapter president in British Columbia. We had a client that was nervous about, she had an old Mason Hamlin that they really loved, and they were nervous about sending it off by itself. So they hired me from St. Louis. I bought an RV to do this, an RV with a toy hauler in the back. So we loaded up their piano, and they wanted to ride along with it to make sure it was safe. So I took them and the 3 cats, and I drove from St. Louis, Missouri to Thetis Island, British Columbia, and with their piano, their cats, and them. It took me about 8 solid days of driving. And when I got up there, I had lunch with the chapter president because I thought, well, might as well meet some people while I'm here, and found it was interesting that they don't really have very many rebuilders up there. And when I got up there, there was a lot of repair work from a lot of people who just couldn't find technicians who wanted to do in-depth work, intricate work. So, but anyway, that's us at a brewery. It was a fun time. I hit an elk, which with a grand piano and a bunch of cats and a couple clients, hitting an elk at 9 o'clock at night going 80 miles an hour was a little off-putting, but we made it out just fine. The elk was okay. The elk did not die. We hit it in the butt and it just jumped and ran. And it gets more in depth, but elk was fine. So were we.
All right. Wow. So you took 8 days to move there, and then did everybody sleep in the RV? Did you stop?
Yes. No, we slept in the RV the whole time. They were also nervous. They were nervous about being out in public, and their cats, and they were both, they're both PhDs and overthinkers, and they were just really nervous about driving or flying up there in general. And so they insisted on staying in the RV the entire time. So I brought a tent because I was like, the one man had a sleep apnea machine, and I was like, there's no way I could sleep with that apnea machine going all night. So I brought a tent, and so every night I'd set up my tent, make them dinner because they were elderly. So I'd make them dinner, get everything ready, set my temp up, and then I'd wake up early in the morning, drain all of the black and gray water, get them all buttoned up, drive another 10 hours. So it was fun. It was a lot of work though. It
Yeah.
cost them a fortune to do this, but it was fun. It was really fun. But in the end though, like I said, I made a good profit on it because it was weird. It was interesting, but you got to make money in the end. And so we
Right.
had calculated the whole thing out, and I made, it was a nice profit on the end.
That's great to hear. And it sounds like, man, you could probably make a movie that
Yeah.
experience. And this is the gas station we had mentioned earlier. Am I right?
Yeah, that's we just closed on it about 6 or 7 weeks ago. That's some of the staff that wanted to come up on the day we closed. And so what you can't see is it's a huge lot. So we're gonna make the gas station look just like the gas station originally looked. It was a Standard Oil. We're gonna put all the windows and everything back in, except on the inside it's gonna be 100% music powered. So those bay doors are going to turn into glass, and inside of where on the left side where you can see those bay doors, that's going to be our studio, and we're going to do yoga and meditation daily, and my staff will be able to go for free. So that's a big part of it. Is like it's high stress working on all these instruments for clients, and so a big part of this build out is to have a place that my tuners and technicians can go decompress, do a class, take a shower, eat some lunch, and come back and get back to the emotional side, which is working on people's instruments because we all know this. People really, really cherish their pianos. And so when you put your hands on someone's piano, you better be ready to take on the emotional side of it. And you become, quite often when you get into real builds, when you're putting a soundboard in or a new action, you become the client's therapist through the whole thing because you're giving the piano a totally different voice, and they have to trust that you're going to make prudent decisions and you're not going to ruin their cherished instrument. So my staff feels that pain. And so they're going to take yoga. It's to help deal with the discomfort.
Yep. And by the way, on that note, I was talking with someone who is, actually on the call. I won't say who it is, but like literally said, I think for a couple of rebuilds recently, that the people that they rebuilt the piano for were literally crying their eyes out when the whole job was done and everything came back and it was successful. Yeah. So exactly like you said, it's such an emotional journey for folks. Totally agreed. And yeah, you can bring. I think that's the thing. Of course, it's a hard job. It's stressful. There's those aspects of it, but that is probably one of the things for a lot of us that makes it all worth it, is to see how the look on people's faces, when they get an instrument that gives them the feeling that they wanted it to.
Yeah, I think a big one as well is when another technician is told the piano is ruined, but you can bring it back. That's usually when I get the tears, when people, when they've been told the piano is untunable. But sometimes tuners don't agree,
Mm-hmm.
and it happens somewhat frequently. We will go because we're rebuilders. I understand if someone who's not a rebuilder will have nervousness about doing specific things, but being a rebuilder, we're not as nervous. So we will boldly jump into something that a lot of strict tuners it's out of the realm. And a lot of tuners just don't know of rebuilders they can refer to, where we'll jump right into a piano that's 300 cents flat, because for us to throw strings on and do major repairs, easy peasy. We can string a piano in a matter of hours. So 10 strings breaking, 30 minutes worth of work and we're done. Whereas someone who doesn't do that all the time, they could be there all afternoon putting strings back on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another thing too that probably comes with some of the volume that you have there, as we mentioned earlier, is when you do have those, those tests that you're running in terms of, is there going to be a return on investment for X, Y, Z? Of course, again, from my experience with statistics and science, the larger your sample size, the better opportunity you have that you can get some good information out of a test, right? So that's also really helpful. The sort of benefits of scale and experience and breadth of what you can do, right? It spans all sorts of different levels. Let's go back and look at that the other image that we just brought up of some sort of superhero thing going on. I'm curious what that is here. So yeah, tell us what's this post all about?
Yeah. So we do a piano powered chili competition every year. So we'll bring everything we do is centered around piano. So we hire a pianist and an act, and then we set up a chili competition around the piano, and we have live music on the whole time. And this one is we do it every February, and we usually get around 25 to 30 chili entries, and it's just a fun time. We invite different stores. We invite whoever we've rebuilt for the year. We invite them to come to this. It's a good way to get those people that you have to talk to all the time to relax and have a good time. So, if you're at a school and you're the person that picks up the phone all the time, we give you the invite. We also invite our plumbers and our electricians because, when a pipe bursts in the middle of the afternoon, that plumber needs to be our friend. Even though we're not friends, they need to be friendly with us, and they need to feel somewhat responsible to take care of us quickly. And these things like these chili cook-offs, when we have to call our connection at a church, they've been at the chili cook-off. They know our face. We've joked. They pick the phone up pretty quick. And when another tuner comes and talks to them, they just brush them off because they're loyal with us. They see us several times a year for these different events that we do. And, when you're just strictly tuning, it's really easy for someone to come and poach your work because most people don't understand what you're doing. They don't understand tuning. If you're a secretary at a church, you don't understand what the tuning is, but they do understand this other guy's going to do it for $15 less. And you can't leave yourself prey to that. And these different events, pianos in different places and doing these different things sets you apart in a way that most other tuners are not going to put themselves out like that. And so their $10 discount isn't going to have an effect because they're going to stick with you because you're a brand and they trust you, and they don't want to see you in front of a shopping mall playing the piano and have to look at you and say, "Oh, I switched tuners." So you got to lubricate your connections with people as often as you can. And even if you're a small little shop, it's just little things like tuning for the local performances, giving away a tuning for a school show, things like that carry a lot of weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and on the balance sheet of gigantic corporations, they call it goodwill, right? Or even small corporations, right? And that goes a long way. And I think, it's just another way of thinking about when you're in an industry where you have to be a little bit more conscious about how you distribute resources. That is so I think it's just interesting to reflect on the fact that just because you're sort of paying less for something or it's more profitable doesn't mean you're not actually providing more value in some other form than cash flow, right? So like you're saying with your employees, what a great way to reward them beyond their salary, and the other type of perks that they could have with the job, give them free access to be able to go to this wellness center and hang out and access it, right?
Yeah, for sure. And like personally, you guys probably aren't in the same boat as me. I'm assuming that most people, I'm gonna swipe over so I can see more faces. I would assume that most people are 1 or 2 or 3 man operations.
Mm-hmm.
And I was for years. I was for, a decade. I was a one man show. And it's a different thing. But from our perspective now, our largest goal is employee retention. And coming up with what we're working on this year is the golden handcuffs. We need people that want to stay for their whole life in piano work, because to really, like, as you guys all know to become excellent at piano, you got to really make it. It's got to be your all. If you don't make it your all, you're just never going to really become great. You're just never going to really master it. And it's hard to get people nowadays to feel that way. A lot of this new generation, people in their 30s and their 40s, they just don't want to commit for longer than 5 years. And I see that as a guild. I've been in the guild for 2 decades, and I just watched guild member after guild member just transition. They do 3, 4, 5 years, and now they're in a totally different career. And we personally have to fight that. And the way we're doing that is offering some really large payouts at the 20-year mark, and just coming up with some ways to really keep our employees locked into place. So I don't have to worry about retention anymore. All I have to worry about is paying them, which is a lot easier than worrying about retention.
Right. Yeah. And actually, I mentioned this to you as we were talking. I met who's becoming a new friend of mine recently. We met in Los Angeles, but he's actually in the Chicago area here. He has a trucking business. Great story. Moved to the United States from Ukraine 14 years ago. Kind of like our story. Started by just driving a truck, and he lived in the truck. Even he didn't even have a home, but he had a vision. And years later, he's built this trucking company, which is literally chosen to be the number 1 workplace in Chicago by the Chicago Tribune. And it's kind of similar. Like he gave me a tour of his trucking facility a couple of weeks ago. They've got a gym, they've got little rooms, because the truckers have to come in and out, and sometimes they need a place to stay. They got nice little rooms for them to stay in. Just nice food, nice atmosphere, right? Just a nice place to be. And it's called DVL Trucking if you want to look it up. It's a really cool story, right? But I think as we've reflected upon maybe a couple of times today, you can do this with any business, right? It's just about going the extra little bit. It's kind of on the same level as I've heard it called the wow factor. And the example is, you've got some type of business where people come into an office or something. Do you just bring them in and they sit down at the desk and you have your conversation? Or do you offer them a cup of coffee and, oh, hey, here's a chocolate bar or whatever. And they go, hey, I like this. I like this guy. I like this business. This feels like extra. It's the wow factor. It makes it, hey, you didn't have to do that. And that's why I like it. Right.
Yeah. Well, as we all experience, we all need to find people who are going to take over for us down the road. And you've got to win the people over who are going to do it. We all need to have somebody in our mind, or maybe we don't. Maybe, we're just going to walk away and let the thing fold. But most tuners I know take on apprentices at some point. And we all have that same struggle of how do you get an apprentice to understand the long investment? How do you keep them engaged, and how do you get them to understand how to invest in themselves and stay long term? I don't know. Do any of you have issues with trying to keep apprentices in the group? Is there anyone that's had an experience that was successful with getting apprentices to understand the long term? I'd be curious on feedback on that, because that's a really crucial one for our industry right now. How we're bringing the next generation in.
I will say also anonymously, we have enough folks here. I can't say, I think I've actually talked to probably a couple of people here about stories of just even trying to take on an apprentice in the first place, even just spending 6 months with someone and showing them a few things. And then there's just countless stories. I think the piano industry is especially difficult for whatever reason, just by the logistics of how, the industry works and how you learn things and how, and you can spend time investing in someone. You don't even think about an investment. It's like you're investing in them. Literally, it's for them. Right. But then at the end of 6 months or a year, you go, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. I lost 2 people this last year. Both of them, one was 6 years, the other was 3 years. And that's painful. You put a lot in there, and they become I'm sure you all know, when you apprentice somebody, you give them your heart and soul. You You tell them everything. You give them those little details, like you feel the way that screw clicks when you're pushing backwards. Now go forward. You feel that, those little things, like teaching them these little nuances that you really have to let your guard down and take them under your wing. And when it doesn't work out, it's painful. It's really painful.
Mhm.
And it takes some of the wind out of you. Personally, I bounce back from that pretty well. But if I'm just, we all have to keep taking apprentices no matter what happens, because if we don't, the industry dies. Because the guild's great, but the guild's not really pumping out that many new technicians. It's us tuners that really have to take people in and pass that knowledge on. I'm sure with this group of people that are here, I mean, it's just immeasurable amounts of knowledge.
Mhm.
I'm sure everybody in this room knows 1,000 things that I still have yet to learn. And every time one of us passes away, we just lose all of that. And I find that to be really the most upsetting thing about this industry at all, was watching techs pass on, and just knowing that we just didn't we didn't create a situation where they could share everything
Mhm.
they knew yet, and they're
Mhm.
taking to the grave so many pieces of knowledge,
Mhm.
that we really need as a group. We need to keep that stuff out there, um,
Yeah.
so we can stay active.
Yeah. And for me, my story about that is this project, right? I mean, and this is even has its own difficulties, but I think one of the nice things about it is that it's global, and that it's a bit of a different animal to just have it be something that levels a playing field globally as opposed to in your local city, right? Like, because you could spend time
Yeah.
with someone, right? They meet the same clients that you're working with, and da 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 da, and this and that, and you showed them how to do everything, and then, oh, by the way, a couple of
Oh
years
yeah.
after, they're in bed with the clients, that you
Oh
introduced
yeah.
them to or something. But I think it's not, not to say that that's good, bad, right, or wrong, right? Because I mean, one thing we've said a couple of times on this program is that different techs are for just different people. Like, some, it's not necessarily about who's a better technician. It's just about the relationship with the client and who works better and what type of tuning you like and all that stuff. So that there's that aspect of it. But I think just to not have to worry about that, take it from a different angle, right? And work with people that are just completely not in your market and teach them things and help them grow and have it be something that everybody can access equally as opposed to something that's very local. So I think technology, I'm typically excited about exploring how technology can be utilized to kind of circumvent some of those typical problems we have, and also maybe provide compensation for folks, because I think what helps is, and that's also difficult because it's a imbalanced format, is that ideally if you're teaching someone something and you have all that expertise, there could be some compensation for it, that would help make it easier to teach them things that they could go off with on their own. The difficulty with that is that sometimes those people don't have the cash flow to provide compensation for it. But there's creative ways to solve those issues. So
Yeah.
that's my quick answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, what I lean back on is, and I know that these things get dicey, but if I'm teaching somebody, like if a tech comes to me as a technician, bring them on. It's a handshake, it's an understanding, like, hey, please be upfront with me, yada da da da. But if I'm taking somebody from zero, I have them sign a no compete clause that's good for 2 years and 50 miles of my store. Like, you can go to another city, you can go 55 miles out and do whatever you want. But if I'm going to teach you for free, which costs me a lot of money to teach somebody, for us to send someone in the field, we have to have them in the shop for 2 years of training. I make them get the minimum of 200 tunings in my shop done on the clock. I pay them the whole time. And so our agreement is like, well, if I'm going to do that, you need to go to a different city if you want to open up your own thing, because I don't charge. In fact, you're paid to learn, and that's the exchange. Now, if they're a tuner, I don't do that because you're a tuner. I can't tell you not to work in this city, but I can say, if I'm going to teach you this thing and pay you to learn it, the least you could do is not open up shop or go to my competitor, because, and most people have the most people understand that. They wouldn't, say, okay, you taught me and I'm just going to go work for your competition immediately. Most people are smart enough to understand that. I mean, it's amazing. Some people just aren't. They're daft. They don't understand that kind of stuff. But most people are ethical and know, yeah, this makes sense. But it allows me, when I have that situation, allows me to be completely open where I have no secrets. Because you can't apprentice somebody with secrets. You can't apprentice them with the fear that they're going to outclass you. You have to apprentice them with the hope that they outclass you, that they get better than you. Anyone I train, I want them to be a better technician than I ever could be. And I have no problem. I have no problem with someone becoming a better technician than me. I've got guys and gals I teach to string and do these other jobs, and they, after a year, they're better than me. And I'll openly say, okay, you're better. And that's a good feeling, because, that's you pass them the torch, feels good. As long as they don't steal my clients. That's the only no. Don't steal my clients.
Yeah. And I think also the way I think about it is I'm always getting better at what I do, whatever that is. Right. So like you're always growing as a business owner or something else that you're focused on, so everybody ideally is competing with themselves in the end, to get good at what they're supposed to get best at. And, competition is a real thing, right? There's always zero-sum games, but I think that the best approach is to get good at what you are best to get good at, and keep working at it. Well,
definitely stay in your lane.
It's been really fun yet again, and would love to talk for hours longer, as I'm sure we will offline and in different different situations, Joe. But we've been here for the hour. I don't know if there's any last minute comments or questions. I see Larry put in the chat. It's been fascinating, and appreciating the session. So alongside of me showing my appreciation. But yeah, so I'll sign us off here. Except maybe I might have to mute someone before I do that, because I'm getting some background noise. Let's see here. One sec here. Who is that? Or is there somebody talking in your background, Joe?
Oh, shoot. Yeah, I'm sorry. There is. I've got a couple technicians that just showed back up from the field. I didn't think they were back by now.
No, it's all right. It's relatively quiet. But okay. So anyways, I'll do our outro here. Thank you so much for joining us. We've reached the end of another musical journey at Piano Tech Radio Hour. Thanks to Joe again for joining us, as well as the fact that we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction for piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those that joined us today by signing up for the session individually, you can make your life more convenient by subscribing to PTRH at just $16 a month to get the recording of today's session in our member area, automatic registration for each week's new session. Sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. And of course, we'll see you all again next week. And then just a few more things. There's some links I put there in the chat if you want to check out the Douglas Gregg French Polish Masterclass. That was awesome. The David Clavins Piano Design Masterclass. That was awesome. Also, there's a feedback link. We always like to get your feedback, and subscribe to the podcast. We're reaching back about 2 years, but we're slowly getting the past episodes out on audio. You can listen to that in the car while you're doing dishes, working in the shop. Pretty entertaining. And we just put out the episode with Frederick Chu, like a really excellent classical pianist, talking about pedaling techniques. So highly recommend that episode. And also celebrating that we very recently reached top 100 performing arts podcast on Apple iTunes in the US. So, our little world of pianos is making waves, and we hope to continue to grow. And thanks for everybody's support and sharing and supporting here. Okay, awesome stuff. And a couple more thanks from John and Johan. Thanks, guys, for joining. All right. Actually, Joe, you want to jump back on the link for a second and we can wrap up, but we'll say goodbye to everyone else, and I'll see you back on Zoom in a second, Joe. Bye-bye, everyone. William, I see you said there's an error with the links. The link's in the chat. Oh, I'm sorry. I will double check what might have happened there. Yeah, some of them probably work. Oh, I see this. Okay. I'll check. I'll double check on what's going on with the links in the chat there. I'm sorry. Yeah, I will not be able to fix that today. Oh, that's too bad. I have no idea what's going on. Yeah, they all don't work. All right. Well, I thank you for giving me that feedback. And I'll check. I'll investigate what's going on. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. We'll catch you next week.